The blockade of Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh by Azerbaijan has now passed the 1 month mark. As the blockade continues, an unprecedented humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Artsakh. To discuss this, I'm joined again by CivilNet host and analyst, Eric Hacopian. Eric, thanks again for your time.
A pleasure.
Eric, it's now been a month of blockade in Nagorno-Karabakh. On top of food shortages, a lack of medicine, power outages too are regularly taking place. What do you think of the situation now that we've passed this 1 month mark?
Well, things are deteriorating every day as time goes by. There's just different levels of deterioration, different kinds of shortages that are becoming more acute. And obviously, this is going to lead to an airlift situation if they don't open the road. And unfortunately, I don't see any progress on that front. There's nothing being reported. Mr. Vartanyan has been very clear about, he even denied the Russians' claims about negotiations going on. So at this point, in reality, we have a bad situation that's getting worse every day.
And it must be said that the Armenian side has been proactive in raising awareness, especially on the world stage. Numerous articles in the Western press, Armenian celebrities speaking out, foreign politicians, etc. Names include Serj Tankian, Kim Kardashian, and even the Pope. So why is raising awareness and banging on about this matter so important in your mind?
Well, it's absolutely important. It's because nothing will happen without tremendous pressure, and in this case, Western pressure, because that's what matters. You have this Baku-Moscow tandem, and what you need is pressure, especially on the regime in Baku, and that can only come from the West, and it partly comes from awareness. We had, and I think this is one of the reasons this is being done at this time of the year. Last 2 weeks of the year are very hard to get press. We're sort of past that. And as the situation gets more acute, you get more attention. So if you noticeably, the press has picked up. And I think this, obviously there are concerted efforts in making this happen. And whatever those efforts are, and many of us are part of it, or we know people that are part of it, they just need to be doubled up, because the only thing that can change the situation is massive pressure and massive awareness to this crisis.
And some Azerbaijani officials, including those who are close to President Ilham Aliyev, have been posting photos and videos on Facebook and Instagram from the Facebooks and Instagrams of Karabakh, Artsakh Armenians, showing them eating around a dinner table or celebrating Christmas or New Year. This gained a lot of attention online. What did you think of this when you saw this?
Well, it's ghoulish. Here you are, you're trying to starve a people, and you're essentially saying, I'm not blockading, and then you're trying to highlight the fact that people are not starving when you're responsible for it. And I think that the fact that this is, they always put up the celebratory things that people are celebrating, or there's sort of these, human moments of people getting together and sharing a meal. There's nothing more human than that. It really shows them for what they are, which is sort of an anti-life force, which is sort of the essence of a fascist state. If there's anything that is resistance to state power or oppression, is something that they think should be offensive, or something that will be helping their cause, which is the exact opposite. Here you're trying to commit ethnic cleansing. You're trying to bring about ethnic cleansing. You're trying to starve people out of their ancestral homes. And you're showing the people sharing a few potatoes or a meal together as something negative. It really tells you about the degeneracy of the culture you're dealing with. And it's a country, and at this point, in a political system that is degenerate from top to bottom. And at this point, if this doesn't prove to the world that the Armenians of Artsakh should never live under that wretched regime, nothing ever will. And this attitude is a perfect example of that.
And since the major attack on Armenia by Azerbaijan in mid-September 2022, the United States has been a lot more engaged in mediating between the Armenian and Azerbaijani sides. The State Department too has been in contact throughout this blockade with both the Armenian and Azerbaijani sides. What would your message be to those looking on from DC?
Enough of your mediating. Your mediating doesn't mean a damn thing. We should not be happy that you're talking to both sides. If you're talking to a criminal and a victim and a rapist and someone's being raped, that's not any accomplishment. This is no time for mediation. It is a time for advocacy. It is a time to pick sides, to be honest. And it has to be that there is no conversation until the blockade is lifted. And you have to put conditions on it, whether it is sanctions and other things. So the fact that the U.S. is having these conversations is a good thing. But at this point, our standard is not conversations happening, because conversations have happened for 30 years, and conversations for the other regime in this case, the regime in Baku that is not interested in peace, are simply a device for their next aggression. So at this point, we should not be demanding conversations or becoming a middleman. We need the world to become an advocate, not to allow another Srebrenica on the European continent in this century.
And according to many analysts, though it is Azerbaijan that is blocking the route between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, Russia is not making any real effort to get the route reopened. Many analysts, moreover, pointed to Russia's stance in United Nations Security Council resolution votes. What do you think of what happened at the United Nations Security Council?
Well, I think there are two sets of, there was Russia that was interested in killing any mention of this blockade or condemning the Azeri regime for it, which shows you who they are and where they come from. And then there were the secondary countries, whether it was UAE, Albania, or the UK, that simply wanted language changes. And what the Russians did is they put these language changes that they know would kill the measure, and the language changes was something about praising Russian peacekeepers that no one is going to do at this stage. But let's just be clear, on behalf of the regime in Baku, Russia killed this French initiative in the United Nations, which is the clearest case of collusion between these two states.
And even if theoretically the United States had the ability and could convince Baku to open the route between Armenia and Artsakh, wouldn't Russia derail such attempts, in your opinion?
First of all, the United States does have the ability to force this. The United States has the ability to bend the back of Erdogan. They have the ability to bend the back of Aliyev very easily. This question is, are they willing to use political capital to do so? And yes, there's an essence, we don't know, maybe depending on who's really blocking who. But you can put such pressure on the regime in Baku that you can force them to do it. But that's the ultimate question. It will really tell us about what the Russian intentions are. We don't know. But the truth of the matter is we don't know. The primary, whatever it is, no matter what the Russian role is, this was instigated initially by the Baku regime, because ultimately it is what they want, which is to make Artsakh a place that people cannot live in to get to the outcome they want, which is ethnic cleansing. So they're ultimately more responsible than the other party, but it's almost impossible to answer that question, because we don't know what the ultimate Russian motivations are, and to what extent they're cooperating with the regime in Baku on all matters.
And you say we don't know what the Russian motivations are, but one thing we do know is a poll came out recently, it was conducted before December 12th, that showed an increased negative perception of the Russian side amongst the Armenian general public. What do you think about the evolving perception of the Russian side by the Armenian and Karabakh Armenian population? And shouldn't Russia be wary of this?
Of course, they should be worried of it. But Russian foreign policy. Now, there was this famous marketing book in the United States about how to win friends and influence people. Russian foreign policy. They can write the reverse: how to make no friends and influence no one. And the Russian position in Armenia is collapsing. Now, on some level, they don't care, but the Armenian political system is a democratic one, so public opinion does matter. And what this does is the more the Russian position collapses, the less the government has to fear in backlash from its own population by moving west. The Russian political position is collapsing in Armenia because people don't see them as are starting to see them as a hostile power. I don't think nobody had any illusions about friendship, but they're moving on from sort of a dysfunctional mediator to someone who is actively working against the Armenian state and Armenian nationhood. And by the way, if the object of all of this is to bring down the Armenian government, it's actually having the exact opposite effect, because people see through this thing very easily. I can tell you from my years of experience in politics, voters actually misunderstand a lot of things, but they usually understand a phony situation fairly well. And it's what we see today, for example, because of the cold, there's almost hardly any protesters left there. If the Russians really wanted to open the road, they could open the road because it's very, very cold. And even these people are paid $100 a day to stand there aren't willing to do it. So you could easily open this thing up at this point and not have negotiations or any other thing. So obviously there's secondary motives here. But if the scheme is to break the country or force regime change in Armenia, it's not going to work, and it's having the opposite effect.
And finally, briefly, Eric, the OSCE Minsk Group US co-chair Philip Rika has resigned from his position, an important decision with regards to the Armenia-Azerbaijan negotiation process. Rika is an experienced diplomat, and though he was only in the position for a short time, he oversaw a period of greater US engagement. How would you rate Rika's performance?
Well, you have to differentiate Rika and the United States. The U.S. involvement and negotiations on many levels, on Blinken, on Sullivan, have been relevant. Rika himself was a useless idiot, so there's good riddance that he's gone, frankly. He never added anything, and he was on his way out, and I think he was interviewing, likely for some kind of a think tank gig in some place funded by Baku. He was a rather hostile figure to Armenian interests. So good riddance.
Okay, well, Eric, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.